Today, I'm going over 7 ways people with high emotional intelligence think differently than someone who has medium or low emotional intelligence. And I'm going to explain to you why these ways of thinking are helpful and why they're traits or signs of high emotional intelligence. So let's dive in. The first one is that somebody with high emotional intelligence understands that their viewpoint could be wrong. So many people nowadays are stuck in confirmation bias, where they have a certain worldview and they pretty much seek out information that simply confirms that worldview. We see this in so many different aspects of life, like where people get their information and things like that. Now, somebody with high emotional intelligence will still be firm when they know something is extremely likely to be the right way to go about it. But one needs to be open at least to hearing different perspectives from time to time. Now, you don't have to adapt them, but hearing different viewpoints is extremely important. And I know it can feel like information overload, and that can be really confusing. So that's why sometimes we just get stuck in our ways because it simplifies things for us. But it's okay to have a firm position on something, and it is also okay for people to be able to change their mind, or at the very least, be open to hearing a different perspective. They're open to possibly changing their mind, not that they will, but that they could. And that is just how they think differently. They're open to changing their ways when presented with information that could change their perspective, of course, depending on what it is. Think about it this way. Imagine you believe that waking up at 5 a.m. is the key to productivity because that's what you've read everywhere. But then, you come across research showing that sleep quality and individual chronotypes matters more than wake-up times. Someone with high emotional intelligence doesn't immediately dismiss this because it conflicts with their current belief. Instead, they consider it, they evaluate the source, and remain open to adjusting their approach if evidence is compelling. The second way people with high emotional intelligence think differently is they interpret criticism and feedback as information. A lot of people, especially with low emotional intelligence, will take things really personally. So maybe something happens or somebody gives them a piece of advice or feedback, and they will attack their own self-worth, or they feel like their self-worth is being attacked. Usually this happens because certain negative core beliefs are triggered in somebody. But somebody with higher emotional intelligence can actually see and almost welcome uncomfortable feedback. For example, sometimes it's important for people to ask, "What do you think I could be doing better here?" Or "What do you think I could be doing differently?" Or "Is there a better way to go about this?" Or "What do you think I'm doing wrong?" And this could apply whether people are seeking feedback in their parenting, or whether they're seeking feedback in their video editing, or whatever it may be. You want to be open to feedback. And you want to do this not necessarily because you will take it and fully adapt what they're saying, but sometimes when somebody criticizes you, and when I mean criticism, I mean constructive criticism, and even if it's angry criticism, maybe a lot of it is wrong, but maybe there's a nugget of truth there. And this person might actually be giving you golden information. And sometimes the ability to apply that information that can be useful to you is actually going to help you grow significantly. So people with high emotional intelligence actually welcome that kind of feedback. If somebody criticizes them in an angry tone, they actually listen a little bit to see if there's something here useful that they can use. And even when a lot of it is not useful and not helpful and not delivered appropriately, they're still looking for a nugget of valuable information. The third way people with high emotional intelligence think differently is they think of needs as a balancing act. So in relationships, they kind of see it a little bit like a seesaw. They don't necessarily think, "Oh, I need to put myself first," or "I need to put others first." There's a lot more nuance other than just a binary choice. When people say things like, "You've got to put your oxygen mask on first and then help others," or "You've always got to make sure everybody else is fine and then you can take care of yourself," it is just much more complicated than that. It's about asking yourself, what needs do I have? What needs do they have? And sometimes, depending on the timing, sometimes it's good for you to put others before you, and sometimes it's better to put yourself before others, depending on the situation and the context. But I think through time, in the long term, you want this to be a balancing act. Like, okay, you know what? Today is going to be all about you or about this other person. But maybe one day it can be all about me. Or maybe it's 70-30 today. Or maybe it's 30-70 tomorrow. It doesn't need to be 50-50, but they see it as a balancing act in the long term. And that could apply to romantic relationships or friendships and so forth. For instance, maybe your partner has a huge work deadline and needs extra support this week, so you take on more household responsibilities and give them space. But next month, maybe you're dealing with a family issue, so your partner steps up for you. It's this ongoing dance of give and take that maintains the health of the relationship over time. Number 4 is they can focus on what they can influence, not on things outside of their control. Just because they know that they have influence over something doesn't mean they have control over it. So let's say you're playing a sport. You have influence over the outcome, but you don't have control over the full outcome. And the way that you would have influence is by putting in effort, trying your best, concentrating, having fun out there, doing those things. You have influence over it, but you cannot control the outcome. There are way too many variables to be able to actually control that outcome. And so instead, they orient themselves and they judge their day much more on how well did they do the things that they have influence over, not things outside of their control. And just to let you know, many things, I actually would say most things, are outside of people's control. But there are a lot of things that people can influence. So people with high emotional intelligence attach much more importance to the things that they can influence as opposed to obsessing over the actual outcome, which is outside of their control. This mindset shift alone can reduce so much unnecessary stress and disappointment because they're measuring themselves by the right metrics: effort, preparation, attitude, rather than results that involve countless factors beyond their reach. Number 5 is super important, and I think we would have less work as therapists if more people did this, and it is this: they lean into unpleasant emotions. They see leaning into unpleasant emotions more like a challenge and something that is helpful to their growth, not as something to avoid. So, a lot of people avoid emotional discomfort, and rightly so, because it doesn't feel good. But people with higher emotional intelligence see unpleasant emotions as something that they need to experience in life in order to grow and get better. So, for example, people with high emotional intelligence will lean into an unpleasant emotion like guilt or anxiety because that can help them set boundaries with somebody or have a difficult conversation with another person. When we are constantly avoiding uncomfortable emotions and we just sweep them under the rug, we avoid and deprive ourselves from the things that help us and others grow as human beings. Think of it like this: if you need to have a difficult conversation with a friend who's been taking advantage of your generosity, you'll feel anxious about it. Somebody with low emotional intelligence might avoid that conversation indefinitely just to dodge the discomfort. But someone with high emotional intelligence recognizes that sitting with that anxiety and having that conversation anyway is what will ultimately improve the relationship and help them establish healthier boundaries. So that temporary discomfort leads to long-term benefits. Number 6 is they actually expect people to act on emotion, not logic. So people with lower emotional intelligence just have this expectation that people need to be logical all the time. And this is a trap of expectation, because human beings, we behave much more on emotion than we would like to admit. And when we expect other people to behave logically in a world that doesn't behave logically, things are never quite as they should be. And people grow up resentful of that gap of expectation and reality. So people with high emotional intelligence simply expect humans to behave much more emotionally than logically. And that helps them, to a certain degree, maybe lower their expectations and be able to be more accepting of the world as it is, as opposed to the world as it should be. And that gives them much more peace of mind when they do that. So they just expect people to behave out of emotion, not out of logic. Now, this doesn't mean that they're cynical or think people are completely irrational. It just means that they're realistic about human nature. They understand that even the smartest people can make decisions based on fear, love, anger, or insecurity rather than pure reason. And when you expect that, you're less shocked and upset when it actually happens. Number 7 is super important to be able to repair relationships, and it's this: they see accountability as a strength, not as a weakness. This means taking accountability for your role or part of the problem. Most problems, especially interpersonal problems, not all of course, but a lot of them, if you were to put a pie chart of blame, it could be divided up. So it could be somebody has 20% fault, somebody has 80% fault. And they see how they contributed perhaps to the problem. And most people deep down inside know how they might have contributed. But sometimes ego gets in the way and doesn't allow us to accept that responsibility. Now, this doesn't mean that they over-apologize to avoid conflict. It simply means that they recognize when they do something wrong and they take accountability. Now, of course, we don't want people just to apologize when it is truly 0% their fault. We don't want that either. But when they know deep inside they contributed to the problem and they accept it and they take accountability, they can see that as a sign of strength. And they see it as a sign of strength because it helps repair relationships and it's also connected to their core values. In other words, they care more about the health of their relationships than their own pride. When you can say, you know what, I see how my actions contributed to this situation and I'm sorry for my part in it, that is incredibly powerful. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone who values connection over ego, growth over being right. And that's a hallmark of emotional intelligence. So, those are 7 ways in which people with high emotional intelligence think differently. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you and see you in the next one.